You are welcome to session 2 of learning, Psych 337. My name is Inusa Abdul Nasiru of Psychology Department, University of Ghana, Legon. We are going to continue our discussions on learning. And this session, we're going to be looking at, session overview. So in psychology, different approaches are used when we study learning. It is important to note that these different views on how learning should be studied reflect the various schools of thought and perspectives in psychology. It is important to understand how the various approaches view learning, since this will be useful as you progress in your study of psychology. You'll be making use of what you've learned in this course in other courses that you'll be learning ahead. So the objectives. We expect that at the end of this session, you'll be able to understand the various approaches to the study of learning. There are several of them. You will look at them, you understand them, be able to explain to your colleagues. We also expect that you'll be able to differentiate between behavioral and cognitive approaches to the study of learning. You understand each of these and then get to know the differences. You'll be able to explain why sometimes animals are used in experiments in psychology. There are so many reasons that have been advanced for using animals in experiments when studying psychology, especially in learning and memory. So the key topics to be discussed in this session are 4. The first one talks about the behavioral approach to the study of learning. And the second topic, we'll be looking at the cognitive approach to the study of learning. And then number 3, we'll look at the biological or neuropsychological approach to the study of learning. The fourth topic is the use of animals in learning experiments. Why it's important to use animals, and also some of the dangers involved when animals are used in experiments, especially when studying learning. I have provided relevant texts and chapters and other reading materials on Sakai for your attention. So let's look at the first topic. Topic 1, the behavioral approach to the study of learning. You might have heard of behaviorism when you were at the lower level. We want to look at their approach to the study of learning. So learning according to behaviorists, they endorse associative learning. Behaviorists endorse associative learning. And as a result of it, several researchers have worked on experiments, how to study the way organisms learn, an association between one stimulus and the other, or between a response and its consequences. They focus more on observable behavior. So behaviorists are more concerned with observable behavior. To the behaviorists, they view simple association of classical condition and operant condition as building blocks of all learning. For example, if a word is consistently paired with an object, a time comes where that object acquires the properties of the word. So this kind of association is what can be seen as the focus of the behaviorists. For instance, a child does not readily respond to his or her name until consistently pairing him with the name. So when the child begins to respond to the name, one can say that the child has come to learn through association that the name refers to him or her. This is just one of the examples. And behaviorists tend to use animals in their learning experiments, and the findings apply to learning by humans, because it has been observed that animals also have ways of creating association between one stimulus and the other, or behavior or response and its consequences. And this is then applied to human life situations. You can try your hand on this. This is the first topic which we just ended. What is the key emphasis of the behaviorist perspective to learning? Now let's look at the second topic, topic 2, the cognitive approach to the study of learning. The cognitive approach to the study of learning. The cognitive learning approach. This perspective holds the view that human beings or organisms use cognition in whatever they do. And this situation can be compared with what happens with a computer, how it works. You feed information to the mind just as you feed to a computer. The information goes through cognitive processes of storing, transforming, and retrieval in your mind, just as it will happen in the situation of a computer. At the end of the day, there is a process which will influence behavior of the person or the organism, just as the outcome or whatever the computer will generate later on. So the cognitive learning approach has been compared with the information processing approach to the study of the mind, according to Terry 2000. It's important to note that the basic tenet is the claim that people make internal and mental representations of stimuli. People and other organisms make internal and mental representations of stimuli. So these mental representations serve as points of reference which guide or direct behavior. For instance, the first time you use a new road, you will find it strange. That is, if you are using a road for the first time, you've not been there before, and you are now using it for the first time, you will find it strange. But if you have that intention of using the road again, you will form a mental image of the route, taking note of the various landmarks, the signs, the signposts, the junctions, buildings and their inscriptions and so on, so that when in future you come in to use the road, you find it easy. The cognitive perspective has it that you form internal or mental representation of the road or the routes, taking into consideration the key landmarks which will help you to get there. We'll talk more on the cognitive perspective. Sample question: what is the role of mental representation in learning? Try this on your own as you learn to read more of the items put on Sakai regarding reading materials for the previous topic. Now let's look at the next topic, topic 3. We're going to look at the biological or neuropsychological approach. You remember, it's very important for psychology to also look at biological basis of behavior, which you might have done at the lower level. In learning, the biological or neuropsychological approach is also considered. It's a very important area. But just as a reminder, let's look at neuropsychology. It's the field of psychology that deals with the neural and biological basis of behavior and mental processes. That is just for you to be reminded of what this area is about. The goal is to discover the biological events that underlie learning. They want to find out what biological processes or which biological processes go on or take place when looking at learning. So they emphasize on the organism's biological makeup that makes it capable of learning certain behaviors better than others. For instance, through research, it's been observed that rats have an urge for taste. And it's been found also that pigeons, the kind of bird, they learn faster when learning involves vision. Some of these have been arrived at using these animals and birds in experiments. There is an area in psychology called comparative psychology. They do this a lot, looking at behaviors of animals and comparing it with human beings and so on. So this perspective, biological or neuropsychological approach, have this thinking that they want to discover whatever biological events that underlie learning. Sometimes biological constraints can limit the organism from being able to learn certain behaviors. For instance, human beings are able to speak because they may have the rightful chords and parts of their biological system that allows them to speak. Animals may not be able to speak because they don't have the vocal cords, though they can communicate or make noise. Well, it's debatable. Some will say they speak, but in real terms, they make sounds, they communicate, they send signals, and so on. But the complex nature of human being, having the rightful cause and the parts of body allow them to speak fluently. This approach uses the approach of biological and neuropsychology. They use minor surgery sometimes on animals so they can find the areas of the brain or the neural pathways that are necessary when learning is taking place. They really want to find out the biological basis of such behaviors as learning. So that is it for biological perspective. We'll look at that later when we look at other sessions that are ahead of us. Now let's look at the last topic for the session 2, the use of animals in the study of learning. Using animals in studying learning. Most of the time, using them for experiments, at the end of which the findings can be applied to human beings. Why is that so? Let's look at it. There is some assumption of similarity between animals and humans, as some researchers confirm. As I indicated earlier, there is this area of psychology, comparative psychology. It looks at behaviors of animals as lower level animals and human beings. And some who argue that humans and animals share some biological features, only at different levels. But whenever using animals in experiments in psychology, there are practical and ethical reasons that needed to be considered. We want to look at that briefly. Reasons, practical reasons for using animals, especially when studying learning and memory. One of them is that animals are easily accessible. You can easily get animals compared with humans. I'm wondering who will allow himself or herself or his child or his parents or his friends to be used for some form of experiment which will not even bring the person back to life. Animals are used because they are easily accessible. You can easily get an animal. Sometimes you can even go to the shop to buy a pet and use it for experiment or for any other thing. The next point is that studying animal in terms of learning, how they learn, can help in identifying principles that could be applied to human learning. It's been found that when you study learning in animal, you can identify certain things, some principles that could be applied to human beings. So animals are used in experiments so that we get to understand certain things about human beings better. The next point is knowledge gained from animal learning serves as a background against which the unique aspects of human learning may be perceived more clearly. This goes to support the previous point. It is when you study the way animals behave, including their learning situations, learning behaviors, that you'll be able to appreciate or understand better the human aspects of learning. And the next point talks about the benefits to the animals themselves. Animals, when you study them, it benefits themselves because you get to understand them better and get to know how to handle them. The last point on this is that the experience of animal subjects often can be more highly controlled before and during the experiments. That is, it is very easy, just as the first point explains, it is very easy to have access to animals. The same way you can control the behavior of animals before the experiments, during the experiments, and even after the experiment, so you can get objective results. So this, and there are several other reasons. When you read further in the articles given on Sakai, you get to understand that. But there are ethical reasons for using animals that we want to talk about now. Every research in psychology is guided by a code of ethics. It's important to go by this code of ethics. As professionals, we have our code of ethics as psychologists. One such principle relates to the use of humans in studies that could lead to irreversible damage. So for ethical reasons, it's not a good thing to use humans in some form of experiments. So the use of animals for ethical reasons warranted. The same way, there are laws that govern the use of animals. For instance, even when you have justifiable reason to use animals, you have to euthanize, or you have to kill them humanely after the experiments. You use the animals ethically acceptable, but you have to use them with human face. So there are laid down procedures for using animals. It would be cruel to leave a damaged animal after experiments to be walking about. That is not acceptable, and that is not ethical. Again, there are friends of animals who sometimes have reasons why animals should not be used, but having considered the pros and cons of using animals as against using human beings, one can conclude that animals will continue to be used provided the ethical guidelines that we have will be applied so that the right things are done in a humane way, in a professional way. So this brings us to the end of session 2 of learning. Let's get prepared to look at the next session. Thank you.